I bought two identical properties in the same community. One of them I rented out traditionally, like a long-term 12-month lease. And then the other one, I did a short-term rental. I put it on Airbnb and VRBO. Well, after 1 year, I want to show you how much money I made on each of them. I bought two identical properties in the same community, all right? Same square footage, same layout. I wanted to show you what my numbers look like 1 year later after this. First, I'm gonna start with the traditional rental, all right? So that's what you're probably used to seeing and hearing about is, it's like a 12-month lease, tenant moves in, they pay for their own utilities, they pay me monthly rent, and that's it, all right? It's more simple, but let me just get into the numbers here, all right? So in 1 year, the traditional rental property produced $24,000 in rental income. But you have to factor in the expenses as well too. That's the way you actually calculate your real ROI on this, all right? I bought that property at $365,000, okay? So I was able to collect $2,000 rent on this right away. That's $24,000 in rental income that I collected in the first year, all right? Property taxes on this property are actually quite low, $1,500 for the whole year. I do have a property manager that manages the property for me. They do charge 8% of the rent that's collected. So that is $1,900 there. Cleaning, I only had to clean it initially one time before they moved in. So it was about $500. Repairs, I had a bunch of little odds and ends that needed to be taken care of. So about $1,000 in repairs for that first year. And there is no homeowner association on this property. So my total expenses for the year on this property were about $5,500, okay? Subtract that from my $24,000 and my net profit is about $18,500, okay? So my monthly net income or my net profit I made was about $1,540 a month, okay? So when I look at the acquisition cost of $365,000 and my net profit on this, my annual return on investment was just over 5%, okay? Not bad, respectable, it was cool, all right? And I'm happy with these numbers, all right? These are very sound numbers. They work for me, okay? So how did the short-term rental do, or how did the Airbnb do? That's what we want to know, right? So after 1 year, I made great income on it. I actually collected $50,000 in rents, right? So let's dig a little deeper into the actual costs and expenses of maintaining a short-term rental, all right? I'm gonna go through item by item. Right away, you can tell, I made a lot more rent, $50,000 versus only $24,000 on the traditional rental, right? So you may say, well, that's more than double already. Why wouldn't I do that? Let's ask that question again after I go through all the expenses, all right? So first things first, the most expensive cost on this, believe it or not, is actually cleaning. After each guest leaves the property, you have to pay for cleaning, all right? Of course, you do this in a way by putting it into your cleaning fees when you put it on any of these platforms, right? These are very normal, but they're almost pass-through expenses, and actually they are included as part of the income you receive too. So the cleaning fees, they are part of the 50K basically, right? So the biggest cost was cleaning, all right? I was spending on average about $500 a month on cleaning fees, okay? So that's about $6,000 there, all right? Next big cost was the initial setup of the property. I had to get, beds, sofas, other furniture just to, make it seem like a house that you can stay in, right? So that was about $4,000. I did not buy brand new everything. I found used items, Facebook Marketplace, and, all these other things, and then maybe use some Amazon and IKEA in the mix, but it was about $4,000 to furnish the place so I could put it on as a short-term rental, all right? And then initial repairs on this were a little bit higher just because it was kind of a furnished property and everything like that. So it was about $2,000 for all the repairs because, sometimes when guests leave, they break things, they damage things. These kind of, it's cost of doing business like this, right? There were some initial setup fees, $500 there. Utilities, that's a big difference right here. When you do a traditional rental, the tenant pays the utilities, right? But when you do like an Airbnb, a short-term rental, you have to pay and supply all the utilities. So I have gas, power, water, not to mention internet. I had to provide Wi-Fi for people, subscriptions like Netflix and things like that for people too. Here's a little breakdown of all those. So electricity, about $2,100 a year. Property taxes, $1,500 again. VRBO and Airbnb fees, $1,800 there. Supplies, what do I mean by supplies? Well, you have to supply things like shampoo and soap, toilet paper, and all these things like that. I also like to include, some water or some snacks, coffee, things like that too. So those are supplies that you have to keep in the house too. Light landscaping, I spent about $800 in that first year only just for cleanup. We talked about Wi-Fi already, $50 a month there. And I did not need to supply appliances because it was included in the sale of the property, so I didn't have to buy appliances. But if you bought a house that did not have appliances, you definitely have to supply those too on an Airbnb. All right, and so all in all, what are my total expenses on the short-term rental? And the grand total of my annual costs for that was $22,900, all right, which gives me a net profit of $27,100 for the year, okay? So when I annualize that, and my true ROI on my short-term rental was 7.5%, all right? So what does that mean in dollars? In the first year, my net was higher by $8,600 by doing the short-term rental after I had taken out all those expenses, all right? So on a monthly basis, that's about $718, all right? So you break it all down. Yes, I made $8,600 more a year on the Airbnb. I made $700 more a month to get there, right? But at what cost though? All right, I can tell you, here's my big takeaway from this little test I did, right? The traditional rental, all the work is up front. You clean it up, you make it look nice, you screen for the tenants, you get in the lease agreement, and then pretty soon it's like mailbox money now. Rent comes in every month, it's all good, right? It's more, it's just more of a passive investment, all right? For the short-term rental or the Airbnb, it was much less of a passive investment, all right? It's, going to the property and checking it out after every guest, making sure, the property's okay before they check in too, updating, little door codes for them, Wi-Fi issues, all types of little things like that. So it was much less of a passive investment. It was more active, all right? So did I make more money on that? Yes, I did. But I also invested more of my own time on that as well too. So when I look at it, was the $700 more a month that I was making worth it to me? I would say, yes, it was, all right? I mean, the reason why I say that is it's more income. Things you have to consider is you don't need to replace the furniture every year too, right? So, I mean, that's probably gonna be good for a couple years for me. I mean, eventually I have to replace, blankets, towels, and things like that too. But it's not like I have to buy new beds every year or new sofas every year too. So I expect my ROI to increase steadily with the short-term rental, all right? Whereas, it's less passive and it's a little more work, but it's something that it's not terrible either, because I have the cleaning people to do the cleaning. I have maintenance people to do the maintenance. It's really a lot more with maintaining your online profile, making sure you have great reviews from your past guests. You're accommodating, you're able to respond to inquiries. If a guest says, hey, something, there's power's out, or I'm not getting something like that, you have to kind of drop what you're doing and handle it, or have someone willing to go over there and address and fix these issues too. Because, if you were staying at an Airbnb and something was not working, you would expect those things to be fixed immediately, right? Whereas with the traditional rental, it was kind of like set it and forget it, right? I pay my property manager to deal with tenant issues, right? I never talk to that tenant, right? With short-term rentals, like I said, you're much more involved, all right? So it depends on where you are in your investing, all right? I think if you don't have a lot of extra time and you want to get into a rental property, I think a traditional rental might be a little easier to ease into. It's less hands-on, it's more of a passive investment where, it's not taking up a bunch of your time to do this investment, right? And you have all the benefits of that still too with a traditional rental is, rents will increase over time, your value and your property will appreciate in value over time as well, and you can still do what you normally do and it doesn't take much of your time at all, okay? Whereas if maybe you have more time and less capital, all right? Maybe maximizing your cash flow is your priority. What if What if you wanted to grow a portfolio of a lot of houses you own, right? Well, maximizing your cash flow would be, the right move there, because the more money you make, the more you can borrow and the more houses you can buy too, right? But just know you're going to do more running around, or you're going to pay somebody to do this running around and management for you as well too. So it really depends on which way you want to feel on this. So, is a 7.5% return really, really good? It's fair. It's fair. It's not a horrible return. And is a 5% return terrible, or is it really, really good? I would say it's a fair return again. So you just really have to think, what's more important to you? Maximizing cash flow or saving your own time? Okay, so that's kind of my insight with this experiment of doing a traditional rental versus a short-term rental on that. So if you've been thinking about investing in a property and you're not really sure whether you want to do a traditional or a short-term rental, all right, you have questions, please reach out to me. I love working with investors. I specialize in this, and I would love to have this conversation. Check out my other videos, and I'll see you next time.